Apologies to keep you waiting, but we had a longer than planned council, all good, and we had to then change this whole room into your room. So here we are. I'm not going to take any more of your time. I'll hand straight over to Seb.
Jackie, thank you. We completed our traditional one-day council meeting in advance of the World Championships. We will reconvene as a council on the 13th of August for our second day. And I'm actually, as a British council member wearing a very distinct hat, was able to thank the council for their trust in offering the World Championships to London back in 2011. And from a personal perspective, I did reflect that had we been unsuccessful as a city in 2005, when in Singapore we were pitching to stage the games, we wouldn't have had an Olympic park, and we wouldn't have had an Olympic stadium, and we wouldn't have been pitching in 2011 to stage the third largest sporting event in the world. And the legacy story, I think, has been a very strong one. And I also thank the council, many of them in that room that day, that made that decision when I asked them not to turn the legacy tap off, that we had the opportunity to bring these World Championships to London 5 years beyond the Olympic Games. And again, just thank them for that. We covered much ground today, and I'm not going to go into huge detail around that. Much of it actually around what I would simply describe as empowerment, and there were 2 or 3 really exciting developments and initiatives, and that empowerment was effectively allowing those who are elected to serve to do their job more effectively and with greater sense of purpose. And those discussions effectively centred around the developments and initiatives that you'll hear a little bit more about, and one particularly from Olivier. We created a youth council, which is really important if we are to help understand the world that young people live in, and not just talk semi-knowledgeably, as most people do, about young people's attitudes and millennials. We do really actually need to understand the world that they live in and how that world fits in with our sport. So that was a very important development. The other thing I was particularly pleased about was that, as one of the recommendations from the Women's Committee, was the creation of IAAF scholarships to help us in our avowed intent to get more women into senior positions in our sport. We have a very clear roadmap from that was agreed at the Special Congress in November in Monaco to create pathways and programs and to make sure that we, particularly in that area, but more appropriately across a whole range of diversity, that we actually look like a sport and an organisation that reflect the world that young people live in. So that was important, and there are programs and schemes already underway, actually currently in London at this moment. I'm also delighted to have been joined by Rune Andersson, the independent chair of the Russian task force. He will report to, he reported to, or was reported to council this afternoon, and I'm going to actually ask Olivier to talk about the third of the initiatives that I was going to refer to in my opening remarks. Jackie.
Yes, Olivier.
Olivier.
Great, thank you, Seb, thank you, Jackie. I've been here I've been at the IAAF for about 10 months now, and I've been saying since the beginning that it's a great sport with incredible athletes, outstanding athletes, and with amazing stories to tell. And I'm sure that over the next few days, London will confirm that, will demonstrate that in a way that will be incredible. The good news now is that we will be able to take greater control of the way these incredible events, our World Championships, are being presented to our fans around the world. So you'll recall that back in April, we launched an RFI for host broadcasting services, and we had a lot of interest from different companies. And I'm very pleased to announce today that we have reached an agreement with ITN Productions, a company here based in the UK, to start a joint venture from early 2018 We've been working together a little bit already, and you'll see some of the content we've been creating together, but we'll be fully operational as of January. And this is a joint venture that will be covering host broadcasting services and media production. The focus initially will be on increasing the quality, increasing the consistency, but also increasing the volume of the content we produce around our events. I'm saying volume, and I'm stressing volume to make a point to what Seb just mentioned earlier about the youth council that we're intending to create. We are going to a world where content is short, and we need to create more content to really go after, to really find a way to talk to these youth and to find a way to reach them in places they don't expect. We'll be initially focusing on the World Athletic Series, our WAS events, all our World Championships, as well as the World Indoor Tour. And then we'll go after into non-live production services and production requirements. So we're talking about magazines, we're talking about digital, we're talking about eventually branded content for our sponsors if we so need. But it will be great. It will be great to work with them, to work with our partner, with our new joint venture partner, but as well with the greater athletics family. So work with rights holders around the world, work with event organizers, work with sponsors, athletes, to really create more stories and tell more stories in a more modern way that hopefully we will be able to attract more fans with.
Thank you. I'd like to now just hand over to Rosley to talk a bit about the Athletes Commission. He's the chair of the Athletes Commission.
Thank you, Jackie. Today I talked to Council about our activities during London. First, tomorrow we start with the elections for 6 new members of our commission. I must say I'm very happy that we have 15 good candidates for 6 spots for next 4 years. I'm also very happy that our commission will have 3 different events with 3 different goals. So the first one will be in the Athletic Connect, where we will address member federation to encourage them to establish athletes commissions and also to listen their voice in their decision-making process in in day-to-day work. The second event will be in team hotels, where the goal is that athletes can come and talk with us, and also the president and Olivier will join us, and that we create the link between athletes and the organization, and also that we encourage athletes to enter into the member federation athletes commission and to participate. And the third events will take place in warm-up area, where we will have the kiosk, where our members will be presented at least 1 hour a day, when the athletes can come directly talk with us. The purpose of this event is that athletes can share their ideas, concerns, problems directly with us, so that we can continue it in future with our work.
Thank you, Rosley. And then last, I'd like to hand over to Rune to talk to you about the task force.
Thank you, Jackie. So the Council discussed the Independent Task Force report today, the last interim report, and the report has been unanimously approved by the Council, and you will have the report on the website shortly. The task force has outlined that material progress has been made, but that there are still issues that needs to be resolved as we move forward with the work we're doing with RUSAF. The Council agreed to our recommendations to continue to suspend RUSAF and to recommend to the IAAF Congress to continue the suspension until all of the conditions set by the Council has been met. So that was today's discussion. It's clear what the Council has decided, and we will put this forward to the Congress on Thursday. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, so Q&A, normal format. Please say your name and the organisation that you're from. Thank you. Yes, start with Dan on this side, then we'll go over, and then we'll go to you, Rob.
Thank you, Dan Rowan, BBC News. Lord Coe, given how much has happened since the last World Championships in Beijing 2 years ago, just how big a moment do you think this is for your sport? And we know that ticket sales have been very good, but what do you believe will constitute a successful World Championships in 2 weeks' time?
Well, any World Championships is an important moment. I mean, being hard-nosed about it, you know, we have 3 big global moments, each in a 4-year cycle, 2 at a World Championships, 1 at an Olympic Games to shine. We shone in Rio. We came out by some distance as the #1 Olympic sport across pretty much any metric that you wanted under difficult circumstances. The organising committee in London is a very experienced organising committee, so we have no fears or worries at all about the operational success of the games. What do I want out of the championships? I probably would have given you the same answer if you'd asked me that question in 2012. And I want large, big, indelible moments that people, particularly young people, will remember. And I want as many people in the stadium, and as you're right, you know, we've sold the greatest number of tickets ever at a World Championships, and that's a pretty good starting point. But I also want big, indelible moments that attract young people to want to take up our sport, and that's hugely important. And London has an attraction beyond sport that will have a youth appeal as well. So it's a very, very big moment for us.
Thank you. Gentleman here.
Mr. Anderson, are you optimistic that in the near future there will really change something, that Russia will compete in a big event again? Do you feel the sense that they really want to, well, meet all the conditions that are set for them?
I can confirm that our impression is that they really want to meet all the conditions and all the criteria that has been set. It is clear they have shown huge progress since we started this journey in November 2015. But as I said in my introduction, there are still remaining issues to be resolved. Whether that can happen tomorrow or later, it's too early to say. We just need to work with Russia, with RUSAF, and with the authorities to try to remedy and to meet the criteria, and that's when the reinstatement can happen.
Okay, Rob.
Hi, Rob Harris, Associated Press. Could you just outline, please, what the issues still are that remain unresolved for Russia? Thanks.
Sure. Well, you will see in the report that will be on the website shortly what the remaining issues are. It's clearly outlined, but in general, and the main issue is that no meaningful testing, as it says in the criteria, is being conducted. As you will know, RUSADA, the anti-doping organization of Russia, is still not code compliant. They have started some testing, but not comprehensive testing. You would know maybe that prior to RUSADA being suspended, they did some 19,000 tests a year. Now it's a few thousand tests. So there is a long way to go before they can conduct the testing which we consider to be meaningful. So that's one issue, and RUSADA needs to be reinstated. We are working with the Russians on the change in culture. There are some good movements now, started from the athletics themselves, wanting to change, but they haven't shown and demonstrated to us that this is in place. So that's another issue. They need to be able to enforce suspension on coaches, for instance, that has been suspended. That hasn't happened. The race walking coach, Chagin, and Kasarin has not their suspension has not been enforced. They have continued to coach. So that is another issue that needs to be resolved. And you will see from the list of our report on several other issues, which needs to be resolved too.
And Seb, could I ask how concerned are you about the sort of lack of progress by the Russians? And if I could ask a second question, obviously you reflect on how you won the bid to actually have these championships here this week. We're now hearing from LA that LA has got the 2028 games, Paris will get 2024. Just your thoughts on that process. It's been a bit of a sort of strange Olympic bidding process, the fact it's sort of the way it's sort of emerged.
I think from Rune's remarks and the observations made by the task force that it's not that we're not registering progress in Russia. We are, and it is moving in the right direction. I think the discussion that we're having is about the speed of that progress and the task force's observations to us that there are still some outstanding issues. But if you look, if you look at this as I have to, and I have the, in a way, I have the process behind me because this man and our task force has really been doing this since effectively November of 2015. We've seen progress, and yes, some of that, on some occasions, that progress has been quicker than on other occasions, and it's tended to speed up a little bit when there's been a focus normally around the major championships. So it's not that there isn't any progress, but the progress we want has to culminate in a meeting of that criterion. It's clear, it's unambiguous. Look, I'm not in a position. I'm not really in a position to comment on 24, 28. I have a responsibility to make sure that wherever those games are, that our sport, track and field, is represented properly, that we continue to make the case that, yes, we want to see the sport globalised through the Olympic movement, but there has to be a balance here as well. We have to make sure that our ability to deliver the sport that we need to maintain our ascendancy within the Olympic sporting movement, but actually our challenges are not really from within the Olympic family of sports. Our challenges, as Olivier knows only too well, because we spent a lot of the day discussing that, come from sports that are not actually in the Olympic movement. So yes, whether it's Paris or Los Angeles and whatever sequence, that's really a matter for the IOC. But we obviously will want to make sure that whatever that sequence is, our sport is properly represented, and we leverage everything we can in those two particular marketplaces.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah,
Do you want to wait for the mic?
Yeah, actually, I have two questions. First one is for Rune. You did not mention the acknowledgement of, for example, the McLaren report by the Russians. Does that mean they have acknowledged having doped so far? And the second question goes to Seb, of course. Within the sports movement, there seem to be obviously two different speeds of solving this doping crisis with the Russians. Does that hamper you and your efforts as being the fastest and the first one to take that on? Or do you go through that process unimpressed by what the other sports are doing?
Rune, do you want to take the first?
Well, I thought I had been talking for too long, so I dropped that part, but it was on my list here, acknowledgement of the McLaren report. No, it hasn't been resolved. We haven't gotten that acknowledgement and rebuttal of issues that they might rebut. So it's not resolved, and it's an important part of the remaining issues that needs to be clarified.
Thank you. Look, I think maybe just for momentarily reflect on what it is that we set out to achieve here. And we didn't set out to achieve it by benchmarking ourselves against other sports. And you used the word unimpressed. No, it's not whether we're impressed or unimpressed. We made a judgment as a sport that we felt was in the best interest of our sport. And that primacy was upheld actually by the Court of Arbitration, and that was the right decision. But I think it's worth just reflecting for a moment on what the guiding principles were. Even in Rio, which I think got slightly mangled, if I may say so, and probably wasn't properly understood, is that even in the lead up to Rio, we adopted a very clear principle that we would do everything we possibly could to separate the clean athletes from a tainted system. In fact, in Rio, we had one Russian athlete. But the issue going forward for us was very clear. We needed to find a solution, a situation where we were, where possible, we were able to bring in Russian athletes that we were comfortable that were coming from secure and safe systems, and that weren't putting at risk the objectives, the ambitions of the clean athletes. And we have 19. We have 19 authorised neutral athletes from Russia in London. And again, I pay tribute to the work of the task force and also the doping review board that has gone through each and every one of those individual athletes separately. And we've had championships this year, both at under 18 in Nairobi, where I was a couple of weeks ago, in Bydgoszcz for the European event, and just recently in Grosseto. So this is a system that actually is working and has fulfilled that guiding principle that where possible, find the clean athletes and separate them from the tainted system. I think there is another important point here as well. Whether there are vary speeds approach to this is really not for me to observe. That's for other people. But I actually believe that we have got more momentum, meaningful momentum in this area by the position that we have adopted. And that position, as I said, was, I think, for the best interests of our sport. But I'm not here to speak on behalf of other sports. But the process that we got into, I think, was the right process. It remains the right process. And I think it will ultimately culminate in the reinstatement of a federation and athletes that we can then be safe and sure are competing against clean athletes elsewhere in the world and not putting at risk the efforts that those clean athletes have devoted possibly half their lives to. And that, I don't think is for me, they're very clear guiding principles.
Okay, so gentleman here in the blue shirt, second row, and then the lady in the front, and then we'll start going over there.
Dan Salisbury-Jones, ITV News. Lord Coe, at this Championships, athletes are going to be presented with medals that they've previously lost out on because of doping, and athletes have welcomed that. Do you think that the compensation goes far enough? Jess Ennis obviously had a fantastic time despite losing out on that medal, but it can be disastrous for some athletes. Do you think that can be measured, how big an impact it can have?
Look, if a clean athlete is robbed of the opportunity to celebrate a first, second, or a third place in a major championship, there's nothing that is ever going to compensate properly for that moment. I am very clear, though, that when we have the technology available, and to go back into previous samples, and to as well as we possibly can remedy wrongdoing and to represent those medals in on the most appropriate occasion, rather than them being, appearing in a jiffy bag or, a recorded delivery or handed over in the local pub. We have got a World Championships in London, and this has to be the right moment to do it. But I can't sit here and say that that will ever be complete compensation for the fact that the original moment was ripped away from them.
Okay, lady in the front.
Lord Coe, Ute Kobold from ZDF. Two questions I've got. One is, it's Usain Bolt's last race, we think. What do you think the sport is going to lose, and who's going to fill that place, if ever anyone can, very soon, and man or woman? And the other one is, how worried are you that doping is really overshadowing the whole championships? And how do you try to tackle it with more tests? What else? Could you go a bit more into details, please?
Well, look, Usain Bolt is a genius. I can't think of, other than Muhammad Ali in my sporting lifetime, I can't think of anybody that has so had an impact inside or beyond their sport. And when you're sitting there, you can have the Friday night in the pub conversations about who's the best footballer and who's the best tennis player, and we can have arguments about Pele and Maradona or Federer or, going back a few generations, Rod Laver. But there's no argument about this guy in sprinting. He is the best sprinter of all time. But actually, what we're going to miss is not the possible improbability within the foreseeable future of somebody winning 3 Olympic Games back-to-back or breaking a clutch of world records. It's the personality. And we do want athletes with personalities. We, in the world of sort of slightly processed sporting characters, it's nice to have somebody that has a view and fills a room and fills a stadium. But you're not going to, we could have been having these conversations in the 70s and 80s about Muhammad Ali. You're not going to replace Muhammad Ali, but great athletes come along. There's probably more of a pressure on us now within the IAAF and within the federations as well to figure out how we are smarter about recognizing and building up the profiles of great athletes out there. And that's probably going to be will be a major priority for us. Are these championships overshadowed by doping? No. The biggest challenge in our sport is not doping. It is a challenge. The biggest challenge in our sport is remaining relevant to young people. That's what we've spent pretty much most of our day discussing. What is it that we have to do to make sure that young people feel they want to come into our sport as athletes, administrators, coaches? And that's, and finding partners, commercial, public sector partners that recognize that. So, we have challenges. We've got systems in place that are better than they've ever been. I know that's possibly counter-narrative at the moment, but it is the reality. It's certainly safer than when I was competing. And we need to continue with that. But there are other massive challenges our sport confronts, and it's not just simply about doping.
Okay, fourth row, gentleman in the blue shirt, and then we'll go to you behind, and we'll come over, Matt, to you. Yep.
Seb, Nathaniel from SNTV. I'm just wondering, how do you think Usain Bolt will deal with retirement? And do the IAAF, would you consider maybe a role for him to increase the exposure of your sport?
My instinct is he'll deal with it pretty well. But look, it is a, every athlete goes through those phases. If ever I'm in any doubt at all about the moment I just chose to retire, and subsequently over the following 10 or 15 years, I used to sit in a quiet room and open a training diary from at random from any day over a decade. And that's why I knew I wasn't still doing what I was trying to do back then. So yes, he will miss the rhythm and the focus of the day. Not straight away, none of us do. But we have started a sensible discussion with him. It's a conversation I had 3 years ago now. I had a similar conversation actually with the Prime Minister of Jamaica when I was over there for his last race on Jamaican soil. And we both have the same challenge in a way. What is it that we can do to maintain his engagement in the sport? He's going to be incredibly busy. He's going to have 101 things and pressures on his time. I've said, look, if we can claim a little bit of that time, we would love to work with you. Have we tightly prescribed what we're going to do? No. But he does want to help. It instinctively feels to me around young people and engagement and the extraordinary bandwidth of impact that he's had. And Jamaica is trying to figure out the same thing. And if we can both get this right and work together on it, then I think it's a virtuous circle for both. You know, for both Jamaica and also for the continued development of global athletics.
Okay, gentlemen.
We shouldn't also lose his coach. And this is something that I do feel quite strongly about. We do spend a lot of time talking about what happens when athletes disappear. But behind every great athlete, I mean, I'm only sitting here because I'm the product of world-class coaching. So we do also need to maintain close relationships with coaches and not allow them to sort of disappear into the ether when their work may be very publicly done with one athlete, because their contribution, actually, if we're being honest about it, is probably, over the long haul, more important to our sport than any single individual athlete.
Okay, gentleman behind, then we'll come over to the right side.
Thank you. Hiroki Tora from Asahi Shimbun in Japan. I may be too much ahead, but I have two questions for President Ko. First one is, you brought in new disciplines into Tokyo 2020, and how do you think that will impact the program? And number two, you visited Tokyo in the end of June, and did you make any wishes or suggestions to the organizing committee?
No. The introduction of those sports, as we know, is a way of connecting young people, particularly to a particular game. So those sports that were particularly popular for young people in Japan, and we saw some demonstrations of that, have been selected. The Olympic program itself is now looking at innovations, and we are involved in that discussion. And more broadly, the Tokyo Organizing Committee is doing a really very, very good job operationally. They're exactly where they would want to be at this point, and the ability to continue to communicate why they're doing it and the benefits, particularly for local communities, is going to be paramount in the success of those games.
Okay, if we go across to Matt, any questions for anybody other than Seb, who's going to lose his voice in a minute?
Matt Slater from PA. This is for Rune. So you talked about the acknowledgements that Russia needs to make. How important is it that that actually includes an apology? And if so, who needs to make that apology?
Well, we haven't outlined in detail to RUSAF or to the Russian authority how they deal with this acknowledgement and potential rebuttal of findings in the McLaren report. So I think that has to be delivered by the Russians so that we are confident that they have acknowledged the report. I think it is difficult to get an excuse, but we need some sort of an explanation on how they deal with this report in the most appropriate way, because then we are confident that this is not just something that they put aside saying this is falsified like they did in the beginning. I think that has changed a bit, both from the very top level and down. So we will see how we move forward on that.
Okay, the lady in the row in front in the corner, and then we're just going to go to you and then to Michael, and that's probably it.
Nozomi from NHK Japan. I'm going to ask you that, Mr. President. And About recommendation by the European Athletics ratification, record ratification rule. Did council member discuss about that recommendation today? And if it's not recommendation about world record, and if it's not, do you expect that the recommendations gonna be proposed in the next council?
Thank you. No, you're right. The recommendation was a European Executive Board recommendation. The European Council themselves have decided they need more time to talk to the athletes and the various stakeholders. And we didn't discuss it today. It won't be discussed at this it wasn't discussed at this council today. It won't be discussed in August, but they will come back at the right and appropriate time for that to be a global discussion at the council, possibly before the end of the year, but that depends a lot on the continuation of the work that they're doing.
Okay, gentleman here on that same question. Okay, and then Michael. We've got one last one at the end and one over here. Okay, last.
That's very good for me, because I didn't want this to be the last question of the evening. Seb, this is, instead of the bright future you're talking about, I want you to look back for a moment. Last time I asked you about the damage done by the Diak family to the IAAF, you said your councils were still counting. Have you established a figure to the damage that the former president and his son have done to IAAF? How much money they robbed, actually?
Look, we are working, as you know, with the French investigation. That investigation runs across a number of jurisdictions, and we have helped the French investigation to access some of those jurisdictions. But beyond that, no. We have been working now closely under the new status that we have, which is this partie civile that allows us to work very closely, and we continue to cooperate, but the answer to your specific question is no.
Thomas Spickhofen, ARD German Radio. We had some horrible attacks in London in the last few months. Do you expect a change in the mood or in the atmosphere in the stadium because of that? And what do you hear from the athletes? Are they concerned about that?
I genuinely don't expect there to be any change of atmosphere in the stadium, because I haven't detected any change of atmosphere in London. You know, I live and work a large part of my working week in London, and I think, like most Londoners, we just sort of get on with the world as it has to be lived. And you know, you can't concede, you can't cede any territory to this. But I also know from my London years that, you know, uppermost in the operational planning of any championships, any games, is the need to make sure your security, and it's intelligence-led, it's sequential, it's incremental, and actually we're pretty good at this. So, you know, have I had these conversations with athletes? No. I can't think I've had a single conversation with an athlete, but I did make the point at the time, and I communicate regularly to all our member federations by way of a newsletter. And I made the point that, you know, every effort I know is being made, because that's the nature of the way we treat security in a big global city. But it is really important that we don't ever get into that world where we sort of, you know, end up like a, you know, as lockdown city. You know, this is the third largest sporting event in the world. We've sold more tickets for this than any previous World Championships, and people are coming here to celebrate humanity at its best, and humanity will prevail.
Okay, Vicky, sorry.
Question for Rune. When we were here in February, correct me if I'm wrong, the implication was that the earliest that Russia could be allowed back was November. Has that timeline now changed? And if so, how will it affect, say, the World Indoors, which is back in Britain in March?
No, it hasn't changed, because one of the criteria, one of the reinstatement criteria is that there is meaningful testing being conducted, and that cannot happen until RUSADA is fully reinstated. And the timeline that WADA and RUSADA together have set is November. So unless there is other, testing being conducted which we are not aware of, then November is the earliest as of today.
Okay, one last question, the gentleman at the back, sorry.
Thank you. My name is Bambo Akoni. I'm from Making of Champions in Nigeria. My question is for Lord Coe. With the launch of the Youth Council and the end of the World Under-18 Championships, could you shed some light on if there's been any conversations about how youth athletes in Africa are going to be part of the Youth Council plan? At the World Under-18, some countries, including my own, didn't make it because their member federations can't afford to fly them, even within Africa. And at the CAA African Junior Championships, up to 15 countries or so that were expected to compete were not there. So what plans does the IAAF have in carrying along athletes, youth athletes from developing countries whose member federations can't really afford to even get them around their own continent?
I think, if I may say so, there are two separate issues here. First of all, the Youth Council will, of course, reflect, it's written into the terms of reference that it will reflect, there will be global representation. So in our terms, that's from the membership from 6 continents. And that's important, and that is, the direction of travel in all our representative organisations. We want to be as diverse as we possibly can, and we do want to reflect the fact that we are the largest set of member federations out there in any sport, 212, 213 federations. So it is important that all our representative organisations represent the world we live in. The specific discussion you had about the under-18s actually, in a way, sums up the decision I think the Council made about the future of that event, because whether it was the athletes, whether it's the coaches, whether it's many of the member federations that said, look, this is a very expensive process, both to us at the centre and also to the member federations. The coaches concluded, and we spoke at length to them, that World Youth Championships was, for most athletes at that stage in their development, was probably not the most helpful pathway that they could have. We are now looking at ways of redistributing the resources that we were spending on the under-18s, the Youth Championships, to more appropriate, age-appropriate, ability-appropriate regional championships. And that discussion is now taking place with all our area associations. And the cost of getting youth athletes to these events, and maybe the effectiveness of those events when they got there for their future development in the sport, I think was the crucial and critical reason why Nairobi, fantastic as it was, 160,000 people, I think, in the last over 3 sessions at the end of those championships. But that's why we've decided that that is actually the last edition, and we're going to reinvest in more appropriate regional competitions.
Okay, thank you. And again, apologies for keeping everyone waiting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you at the World Champs. Yeehaw.